Hi, Sarah. I'm scared. I'm not gonna lie. I'm scared today. It's the big day. It's the big day. I'm scared. I'm good. I was busy this morning, but I literally thought I had food poisoning last night because nothing even really happened, but my stomach, okay, I thought I either had food poisoning or like my appendix like ruptured, because my entire abdomen area, thank you, was like in so much pain. And I was so scared, and this was like at 10 o'clock last night. I literally went to my bed and I laid down and I fell asleep for like an hour, and then I woke up and it was fine. It was fine. So I was like, okay. Yeah, so I want to keep the tan that I got in Florida. So I've been like trying to avidly be as out in the sun as I can, and I'm going swimming after this. Yeah, I'm okay. It was so weird. It hurt a lot, but I don't know. I don't know what it was. Thank you. But yeah, I am excited about these chapters that we're reading because I don't know what to expect. I don't know what's going to happen. Also, I had a question. I was too lazy to go back in the books, and because I think she mentioned this in Air of Fire. I was too lazy to go back and look. But Alid is the daughter of that girl. What the fuck is her name? Alid is the daughter of Marion? Was that her name? The girl that like risked her life for Aelin. That was her daughter, right? That's who Manon cut? Right? Or am I wrong? Am I wrong? I might be wrong. Yes? Okay, that's what I thought. Because I read her name and I was like, and she's a witch. She's a witch, y'all. What the hell? I know. And so now I'm like worried for Manon, and Astron's in the doghouse, so I'm excited to see where that goes. And what else? I cried during Lysandra and Aylin's talk because they were talking about Sam, and they were talking about like what Arabin had done and like what she's been through. So I am completely team Lysandra now. I love her, and so I can't wait to see more of her. What else? I'm really just stalling right now. I'm so scared to read these next chapters. It's unbelievable. I have no idea what to expect. I have no theories. I have no thoughts other than just like a bitch is fucking scared. That's it. That's my only thought. But yeah, I guess. I fucking guess. Let's just get started because I can't put it off forever. It's going to be a party. Wait, what had just happened? Aelin, like, she was up all night reading the books and she went to sleep, and now it's the day of the party. We're on chapter 15. It's the day of Dorian's birthday party. The day that Aelin is going to try to get Adian out. And I have knots in my stomach. I'm so scared. So scared. Yeah, I'm so scared. So scared. All right, let's just go ahead and get it done. Rip the bandage. Whatever happens, happens. And yeah, okay. Chapter 15. Adian Ash River was ready to die. Against his will, he had recovered over the past 2 days, the fever breaking after sunset last night. He was strong enough to walk, albeit slowly, as they escorted him to the dungeon's washroom, where they chained him down to wash and scrub him, and even risked shaving him, despite his best efforts to slit his own throat on the razor. It appeared that they wanted him presentable for the court when they cut off his head with his own blade, the sword of Orinth. After cleaning his wounds, they shoved him into pants and a loose white shirt, yanked back his hair, and dragged him up the stairs. Guards with dark uniforms flanked him 3 deep on both sides, 4 in front and behind. And every door and exit had one of the bastards posted by it. He was too drained from dressing to provoke them into putting a sword through him, so he let them lead him through the towering doors into the ballroom. Red and gold banners hung from the rafters. Springtime blossoms covered every table, and an archway of hothouse roses had been crafted over the dais from which the royal family would watch the festivities before his execution. The windows and doors beyond the platform where he would be killed opened onto one of the gardens, a guard stationed every other foot. Others positioned in the garden itself. If the king wanted to set a trap for Aelin, he certainly hadn't bothered to be very subtle about it. It was civilized of them, Aedion realized, as he was shoved up the wooden steps of the platform to give him a stool to sit on. At least he wouldn't have to lounge on the floor like a dog while he watched them all pretend that they weren't just here to see his head roll. And a stool, he realized with grim satisfaction, would make a good enough weapon when the time came. So Aedion let them chain him to the shackles anchored to the floor on the platform. Let them put the sword of Orinth on display a few feet behind him, its sacred bone pommel glinting in the morning light. It was just a matter of finding the right moment to meet the end of his own choosing. But he's not going to do that. He's not going to die today. I know he's not. He can't. Chapter 16. The demon made him sit on a dais, on a throne beside a crowned woman who had not noticed that the thing using his mouth wasn't the person who had been born of her flesh. To his other side lounged the man who controlled the demon inside him, and in front of him the ballroom was full of tittering nobility who could not see that he was still in here, still screaming. The demon had broken a little farther through the barrier today, and it now looked through his eyes with an ancient, glittering malice. It was starved for this world. Perhaps the world deserved to be devoured by the thing. Maybe it was that traitorous thought alone that had caused such a hole to rip in the barrier between them. Maybe it was winning. Maybe it had already won. So he was forced to sit on that throne and speak with words that were not his own, and share his eyes with something from another realm who gazed at his sunny world with ravenous, eternal hunger. The costume itched like hell. The paint all over her didn't help. Most of the important... Oh, we switched point of views. I was like, who the fuck is... Okay. Most of the important guests had arrived in the days preceding the party, but those who dwelled inside the city or in the outlying foothills now formed a glittering line stretching through the massive front doors. Guards were posted there, checking invitations, asking questions, peering into faces none too keen to be interrogated. The entertainers, vendors, and help, however, were ordered to use one of the side entrances. That was where Aelin had found Madame Florine and her troupe of dancers, clad in costumes of black tulle and silk and lace, like liquid night in the mid-morning sun. Shoulders back, core tight, arms loose at her sides, Aelin eased into the middle of the flock. With her hair dyed a ruddy shade of brown. I've always wanted to picture Aelin as a brunette. I've always thought she would look so good as a brunette. Like the image I have of her in my mind. And her face coated in the heavy cosmetics the dancers all wore, she blended in well enough that none of the others looked her way. She focused entirely on her role of trembling novice, on looking more interested in how the other dancers perceived her than the 6 guards stationed at the small wooden door in the side of the stone wall. The castle hallway beyond was narrow, good for daggers, bad for swords, and deadly for these dancers if she got into trouble. If Arobynn had indeed betrayed her. Head down, Aelin steadily monitored the first test of trust. The chestnut-haired Florine walked along her line of dancers like an admiral aboard a ship. Aging but beautiful, Florine's every movement was layered with a grace that Aelin herself had never been able to replicate, no matter how many lessons she'd had with her while growing up. The woman had been the most celebrated dancer in the Empire, and since her retirement, she remained its most valued teacher. Instructor overlord, Aelin had called her in the years that she trained under the woman, learning the most fashionable dances and ways to move and hone her body. Florine's hazel eyes were on the guards ahead as she paused beside Aelin, a frown on her thin lips. "You still need to work on your posture," the woman said. Aelin met Florine's sidelong gaze. It's an honor to be an understudy for you, madam. I hope Gillian soon recovers from her illness." The guards waved through what looked to be a troop of jugglers, and they inched forward. You look in good enough spirits," Florine murmured. I'm confused. Does she know that it's Aelin? Does she know? I think she does, but I can't pick up on what they're putting down, so I don't know. Aelin made a show of ducking her head. curling in her shoulders and willing a blush to rise to her cheeks, the new understudy, bashful at the compliments of her mistress. Considering where I was 10 months ago? Florine sniffed, and her gaze lingered on the thin bands of scars across Aylin's wrists that even the painted whorls couldn't conceal. They'd raised the top of the dancer's open-backed costumes, but even so, and even with the body paint, the upper ends of her tattoo-covered scars peeked through. Oh, she does. Okay, sorry. If you think I had anything to do with the events that led up to that, Aylin's words were barely louder than the crunch of silk shoes on gravel as she said, "You'd already be dead if you had." It wasn't a bluff. When she'd written her plans on that ship, Florine's name had been one that she'd written down and then crossed out, after careful consideration. Aylin continued, "I trust you made the proper adjustments? Not just the slight change in the costumes to accommodate the weapons and supplies Aylin would need to smuggle in, all paid for by Arabin, of course. No, the big surprises would come later." "A bit late to be asking that, isn't it?" Madame Florine purred, the dark jewels at her neck and ears glimmering. "You must trust me a great deal to have even appeared. I trust that you like getting paid more than you like the king." Arabin had given a massive sum to pay off Florine. She kept an eye on the guards as she said, "And since the Royal Theatre was shut down by His Imperial Majesty, I trust we both agree that what was done to those musicians was a crime as unforgivable as the massacres of the slaves in Endivere and Calicula." She knew she'd gambled correctly when she saw agony flicker in Florine's eyes. "Pitor was my friend," Florine whispered, the color leaching from her tan cheeks. "There was no finer conductor, no greater ear. He made my career. He helped me establish all this." She waved a hand to encompass the dancers, the castle, the prestige she'd acquired. "I miss him." There was nothing calculated, nothing cold, when Aylin put a hand over her own heart. "I will miss going to hear him conduct the Stygian suite every autumn. I will spend the rest of my life knowing that I may never again hear finer music, never again experience a shred of what I felt sitting in that theater while he conducted." Madame Florine wrapped her arms around herself. Despite the guards ahead, despite the task that neared with every tick of the clock, it took Aylin a moment to be able to speak again. But that hadn't been what made Aylin agree to Arabin's plan, to trust Florine. 2 years ago, finally free of Arabin's leash, but nearly thanks to paying her debts, Aylin had continued to take lessons with Florine, not only to keep current with the popular dances for her work, but also to keep flexible and fit. Florine had refused to take her money. Moreover, after each lesson, Florine had allowed Aylin to sit at the pianoforte by the window and play until her fingers were sore. Since she had been forced to leave her beloved instrument at the Assassin's Keep, Florine had never mentioned it, never made her feel like it was charity, but it had been a kindness when Aylin had desperately needed one. Aylin said under her breath, "You've memorized the preparations for you and your girls? Those who wish to flee may come on the ship Arabin hired. I've made space for all, just in case. If they're stupid enough to stay in Rifthold, then they deserve their fate." Aylin hadn't risked being seen meeting with Florine until now, and Florine hadn't even dared to pack her belongings for fear of being discovered. She would take only what she could carry with her to the performance, money, jewels, and flee to the docks the moment chaos erupted. There was a good chance she wouldn't make it out of the palace, and neither would her girls, despite the escape plans provided by Kale and Brullo, and the cooperation of the kinder guards. Aylin found herself saying, "Thank you." Florine's mouth quirked to the side. "Now there's something you never learned from your master." The dancers at the front of the line reached the guards, and Florine sighed loudly and strutted toward them, bracing her hands on her narrow hips, power and grace lining every step closer to the black uniformed guard studying a long list. One by one, he looked over the dancers, comparing them with the list he bore, checking rosters, detailed ones. But thanks to Ress having broken into the barracks last night and adding a fake name along with her description, Aylin would be on the list. They inched closer, Aylin keeping toward the back of the group to buy time to note details. God's this castle. The same in every possible way, but different. Or maybe it was she who was different. One by one, the dancers were allowed between the blank-faced guards and hurried down the narrow castleway, giggling and whispering to one another. Aylin rose up onto her toes to study the guards at the doors, no more than the novice scrunching her face in impatient curiosity. Then she saw them. Written across the threshold stones in dark paint were word marks. They'd been beautifully rendered, as though merely decorative, but they must be at every door, every entrance. Sure enough, even the windows a level up had small, dark symbols on them, no doubt keyed to Aelin Galathinius, to alert the king to... oh shit! To her presence, or to trap her in place long enough to be captured. A dancer elbowed Aelin in the stomach to get her to stop leaning on her shoulder to peer over their heads. Aelin gaped at the girl and then let out an oomph of pain. The dancer glared over her shoulder, mouthing to shut up. Aelin burst into tears. Loud, blubbering, tears. The dancers froze, the one ahead of her stepping back, glancing to either side. That hurt, Aelin said, clutching her stomach. I didn't do anything, the woman hissed. Aelin kept crying. Ahead, Florian ordered her dancers to step aside, and then her face was in Aelin's. What in the name of every god in the realm is this nonsense about? Aelin pointed a shaking finger at the dancer. She hit me. Florian whirled on the wide-eyed dancer who was already proclaiming her innocence. Then followed a series of accusations, insults, and more tears, now from the dancer, weeping over her surely ruined career. Water, Aelin blubbered to Florian. I need a glass of water. The guards had begun pushing toward them. Aelin squeezed Florian's arm hard. Now. Florian's eyes sparked, and she faced the guards who approached, barking her demands. Aelin held her breath, waiting for the strike, the slap. But there was one of Ress's friends, one of Kael's friends, wearing a red flower pinned to his breast, as she'd asked, running off to get water. Exactly where Kael had said he'd be, just in case something went wrong. Aelin clung to Florian until the water appeared, a bucket and ladle. The best the man could come up with. He wisely didn't meet her gaze. With a little sob of thanks, Aelin grabbed both from his hands. They were shaking slightly. I'm so scared. She gave Florian a subtle nudge with her foot, urging her forward. Come with me, seethed Florian, dragging her into the front of the line. I've had enough of this idiocy, and you've nearly wrecked your makeup. Careful not to spill the water, Aelin followed Florian to pull her to the stone-faced guard at the doors. My foolish, useless understudy, Diana, she said to the guard with flawless steel in her voice, unfazed by the black-eyed demon looking out at her. The man studied the list in her hands, scanning, and crossed off a name. Aelin took a shivering sip of water from the ladle and dunked it back into the bucket. The guard looked once more at Aelin, and she willed her lower lip to wobble, the tears to well again as the demon inside devoured her with his eyes, as if all these lovely dancers were dessert. Get in, the man grunted, jerking his chin to the hall behind him. With a silent prayer, Aelin stepped toward the word marks written over the threshold stones, and tripped, sending the bucket of water spraying over the marks. She wailed as she hit the ground, knees barking in genuine pain, and Florian was instantly upon her, demanding she stop being so clumsy and such a crybaby, and then shoving her over the ruined marks, and into the glass castle. Okay. Obstacle 1 is out of the way. Obstacle 1 is out of the way, and that's just the introduction. That's not even the main event. That was a salad before the main course. God. Okay. Chapter 17. Once Florian and the rest of the dance... No, you know what? That wasn't even the salad. That was ordering the drinks. That was her drink. We still have yet to make our way into the main course. Oh, God. And I'm lightheaded. I am lightheaded. Oh, God. Oh, I was like, I've already read 2 chapters? No, yeah, I have. Chapter 17. Once Florian and the rest of the dancers were allowed in, they were all stuffed down a narrow servants' hallway. In a matter of moments, the door at the far end would open into the side of the ballroom, and they would flutter out like butterflies. Black, glittering butterflies, here to perform the Handmaidens of Death dance from one of the more popular symphonies. They weren't stopped or questioned by anyone else, though the guards in every hall watched them like hawks, and not the shape-shifting fey prince kind. So few of Kael's men were present. No sign of Ress or Brullo, but everyone was where Kael had promised they would be, based on Ress and Brullo's information. A platter of honey-roasted ham with crackling sage was carried past on a servant's shoulder, and Aelin tried not to appreciate it, to savor the sense of the food of her enemy, even if it was damn fine food. Platter after platter went by, hauled by red-faced servants, no doubt winded from the trek up from the kitchens. Trout with hazelnuts, crisped asparagus, tubs of freshly whipped cream, pear tarts, meat pies. Aylin cocked her head, watching the line of servants. A half-smile grew on her face. She waited for the servants to return with empty hands on their return journey to the kitchens. Finally, the door opened again, and a slim servant in a crisp white apron filed into the dim hall, the loose strands of her inky hair falling out from her braid, as she hurried to retrieve the next tray of pear tarts from the kitchen. Aylin kept her face blank, disinterested, as Nesrin Philippe glanced her way. Those dark, upturned eyes narrowed slightly, surprise or nerves, Aylin couldn't tell. But before she could decide how to deal with it, one of the guards signaled to Florine that it was time. Aylin kept her head down, even as she felt the demon within the man rake its attention over her and the others. Nesrin was gone, vanished down the stairs, when Aylin turned back. Florine strode down the line of dancers waiting by the door, her hands clasped behind her, back straight, shoulders back, necks uplifted. You are light, you are air, you are grace. Do not disappoint me. Florine took up the basket of black glass flowers she'd had her steadiest dancer carry in, each exquisite bloom flickering like an ebony diamond in the dim hall light. If you break these before it's time to throw them down, you are finished. They cost more than you're worth, and there are no extras. One by one, she handed the flowers down the line, each of them sturdy enough not to snap in the next few minutes. Florine reached Aylin, the basket empty. Watch them and learn, she said loud enough for the demon guard to hear, and put a hand on Aylin's shoulder, ever the consoling teacher. The other dancers now shifting on their feet, rolling their heads and shoulders to look in her direction. Aylin nodded demurely, as if trying to hide bitter tears of disappointment, and ducked out of line to stand at Florine's side. Trumpets blasted in through the cracks around the door, and the crowd cheered loud enough to make the floor rumble. I peeked into the great hall, Florine said so quietly Aylin could barely hear her, to see how the general is faring. He is gaunt and pale, but alert, ready for you. Aylin went still. Fuck! I always wondered where Arabin found you, Florine murmured, staring at the door as if she could see through it. Why he took such pains to break you to his will, more so than all the others. The woman closed her eyes for a moment, and when she opened them, steel gleamed there. When you shatter the chains of this world and forge the next, remember that art is as vital as food to a kingdom. Without it, a kingdom is nothing, and will be forgotten by time. I've amassed enough money in my miserable life to not need any more, so you will understand me clearly when I say that wherever you set your throne, no matter how long it takes, I will come to you, and I will bring music and dancing. Aww! Aylin swallowed hard before she could say anything. Florine left her standing at the back of the line and strolled to the door. She paused before it, looking down the line at each dancer. She spoke only when her eyes met Aylin's. Give our king the performance he deserves. Florine opened the door, flooding the hallway with light and music and the scent of roasted meats. The other dancers sucked in a collective breath and sprang forward, one by one, waving those dark glass flowers overhead. As she watched them go, Aylin willed the blood in her veins into black fire. Adian. Her focus was on Adian, not only the tyrant, seated at the front of the room, the man who had murdered her family, murdered Marion, murdered her people. If these were her last moments, then at least she would go down fighting, to the sound of exquisite music. It was time. Shit. I'm scared. I'm scared. One breath, another. She was the air of fire. She was fire and light and ash and embers. She was Aylin Fireheart, and she bowed for no one and nothing save the crown that was hers by blood and survival and triumph. Aylin squared her shoulders and slipped into the bejeweled crowd. I'm gonna throw up! Adian had been watching the guards in the hours he'd been chained to the stool, and had figured out who best to attack first, who favored a certain side or leg, who might hesitate when faced with the wolf of the north, and most importantly, who was impulsive and stupid enough to finally run him through, despite the king's command. The performances had begun, drawing the attention of the crowd that had been shamelessly gawking at him, and as the 24 women floated and leaped and twirled into the wide space between the dais and his execution platform, for a moment Adian felt bad for interrupting. These women had no cause to be caught up in the bloodshed he was about to unleash. It did seem fitting, though, that their sparkling costumes were of darkest black, scented with silver. Death handmaidens, he realized. That was who they portrayed. It was as much a sign as anything. Perhaps the dark-eyed Silba would offer him a kind death instead of a cruel one at the blood-drenched hands of Hellas. Either way, he found himself smiling. Death was death. The dancers were tossing fistfuls of black powder, coating the floor with it, representing ashes of the fallen, probably. One by one, they made pretty little spins and bowed before the king and his son. Time to move. The king was distracted by a uniformed guard whispering in his ear. The prince was watching the dancers with bored disinterest, and the queen was chatting with whichever courtier she favored that day. The crowd clapped and cooed over the unfolding performance. They'd all come in their finery. Such careless wealth. The blood of an empire had paid for those jewels and silks, the blood of his people. An extra dancer was moving through the crowd, some understudy, no doubt trying to get a better view of the performance, and he might not have thought twice about it had she not been taller than the others, bigger, curvier, her shoulders broader. She moved more heavily, as if somehow rooted innately to the earth. The light hit her, shining through the lace of the costume sleeves to reveal swirls and whirls of markings over her skin, identical to the paint on the dancers' arms and chests, save for her back, where the paint was a little darker, a little different. Dancers like that didn't have tattoos. Before he could see more, between one breath and the next, as a cluster of ladies in massive ball gowns blocked her from sight, she vanished behind a curtained-off doorway, walking right past the guards with a sheepish smile, as if she were lost. When she emerged again, not a minute later, he only knew it was her from the build, the height. The makeup was gone, and her flowing tulle skirt had disappeared. No, not disappeared, he realized, as she slipped back through the doorway without the guards so much as looking at her. The skirt had been reversed into a silken cape, its hood covering her ruddy brown hair, and she moved like a swaggering man, parading for the ladies around him, moved closer to him, to the stage. The dancers were still tossing their black powder everywhere, circling around and around, flitting their way across the marble floor. None of the guards noticed the dancer turned noble, prowling toward him. One of the courtiers did, but not to cry in alarm. Instead, he shouted a name. A man's name, and the dancer in disguise turned, lifting a hand in greeting toward the man who'd called and giving him a cocky grin. She wasn't just in disguise. She'd become someone else, completely. Oh, God. My hands are sweating. Hold on. Closer and closer she strutted, the music from the gallery orchestra rising into a clashing, vibrant finale, each note higher than the last as the dancers raised their glass roses above their heads, a tribute to the king, to death. The disguised dancers stopped outside the ring of guards flanking Adian's stage, patting herself down as if checking for a handkerchief that had gone missing, muttering a string of curses. An ordinary, believable pause, no cause for alarm. The guards went back to watching the dancers, but the dancer looked up at Adian beneath lowered brows. Even disguised as an aristo man, there was a wicked, vicious triumph in her turquoise and gold eyes. Behind them, across the hall, the dancers shattered their roses on the floor, and Adian grinned at his queen as the entire world went to hell. Chapter 18. It wasn't just the glass flowers that had been rigged with a reactive powder quietly purchased by Aelin at the Shadow Market. Every bit of sparkling dust the dancers had tossed about them had been full of it, and it was worth every damned silver she'd spent as smoke erupted through the room, igniting the powder they'd been scattering everywhere. The smoke was so thick she could barely see more than a foot ahead, and blended perfectly with the gray cloak that had doubled as the skirt of her costume, just as Erebin had suggested. Screaming halted the music. Aelin was already moving for the nearby stage as the clock tower that would save or damn them all, struck noon. There was no black collar around Adian's neck, but that was all she needed to see, even as relief threatened to wobble her knees. Before the clock's first strike finished, she had drawn the daggers built into the bodice of her costume, all the silver thread and beading masking the steel on her, and slashed one across the throat of the nearest guard. Aelin spun and shoved him into the man closest to him as she plunged her other blade deep into the gut of a third. Florine's voice rose above the crowd, ushering her dancers out, out, out. The second strike of the clock's tower sounded, and Aelin yanked her dagger back from the belly of the groaning guard, another surging at her from the smoke. The rest would go to Adian, on instinct, but they'd be slowed by the crowds, and she was already close enough. The guard, one of those black uniformed nightmares, stabbed with his sword, a direct attack to her chest. Aelin parried the thrust aside with one dagger, spinning into his exposed torso. Hot, reeking blood shot onto her hand as she shoved her other blade into his eye. She was still falling as she ran the last few... he was still falling as she ran the last few feet to the wooden platform and hurled herself onto it, rolling, keeping low until she was right up under two other guards who were still trying to wave away the veils of smoke. They screamed as she disemboweled them both in two swipes. The fourth strike of the clock sounded, and there was Adian, the three guards around him impaled by shards of his stool. He was huge, even bigger up close. He's so hot. Ah! I can't. A guard charged for them out of the smoke, and Aelin shouted "duck" before throwing her dagger at the man's approaching face. Adian barely moved fast enough to avoid the blow, and the guard's blood splattered on the shoulder of her cousin's tunic. She lunged for the chains around Adian's ankles, sheathing her remaining blade at her side. A jolt shocked through her. A blue light seared her vision as the eye flared. She didn't dare pause, not even for a heartbeat. Whatever spell the king had put on Adian's chains burned like blue fire as she sliced open her forearm with her dagger and used her blood to draw the symbols she'd memorized on the chains. Unlock. The chains thudded to the ground. Seventh strike of the clock. The screaming shifted into something louder, wilder, and the king's voice, "I forgot he was there," boomed over the panicking crowd. The guard rushed at them, his sword out. Another benefit of the smoke, too risky to start firing arrows, but she'd only give Arabin credit if she got out of this alive. She unsheathed another blade, hidden in the lining of her gray cloak. The guard went down, clutching at his throat, now split ear to ear. Then she whirled to Adian, pulled the long chain of the eye from around her neck and threw it over his head. She opened her mouth, but he gasped out, "The sword." And that's when she noticed the blade displayed behind his stool. The sword of Orinth, her father's blade. She'd been too focused on Adian, on the guards and the dancers to realize what blade it was. "Stay close," was all she said as she grabbed the sword from the stand and shoved it into his hands. She didn't let herself think too much about the weight of the blade, about how it had even gotten there. She just grasped Adian by the wrist and raced across the platform toward the patio windows, where the crowd was shrieking and guards were trying to establish a line. The clock issued its ninth strike. She'd unlock Adian's hands as soon as they got to the garden. They didn't have another second to spend in the suffocating smoke. Adian staggered but kept upright, close behind as she leaped off the platform into the smoke, right where Brullo claimed two guards would hold their position. One died with a dagger to his spine, the other a blow to the side of the neck. She squeezed the hilts of her daggers against the slippery blood now coating them, and every inch of her. His sword gripped in both hands, Adian jumped down beside her, and his knees buckled. He was injured, but not from any wound she could see. She discerned as much in the moment she'd weaved through the crowd, altering her demeanor as Lysandra had instructed. The paleness of Adian's face had nothing to do with fear, nor did his shallow breaths. They'd hurt him. It made killing these men very, very easy. The crowd was bottlenecking by the patio doors, just as she had calculated. All it took was her shouting, "Fire! Fire!" and screaming turned frantic. The crowd began shattering the windows and the glass doors, trampling one another and the guards. People grabbed buckets to douse the flames, water spraying everywhere and splashing away the word marks on the thresholds. The smoke billowed out ahead, leading the way into the garden. Aelin pushed Adian's head down as she shoved him into the mass of fleeing courtiers and servants, thrashing, squeezing, shouting, ripping at her clothes until the noontime sun blinded her. Adian hissed. Weeks in the dungeons had probably wrecked his eyes. To Just hold on to me, she said, putting his massive hand on her shoulder. He gripped her hard, his chains knocking against her as she waded through the crowd and into open, clear air beyond. The clock tower bellowed its 12th and final strike as Aelin and Adian skidded to a halt before a line of 6 guards blocking the entrance to the garden hedges. Aelin stepped out of Adian's grip, and her cousin swore as his eyes adjusted enough to see that what now lay between them and escape. Don't get in my way, she said to him, then launched herself at the guards. Rowan had taught her a few new tricks. She was a whirling cloud of death, a queen of shadows. I love when they put the title of the book in the books. And these men were already carry-on. Slashing and ducking and twirling, Aelin gave herself completely to that killing calm until the blood was a mist around her and the gravel was slick with it. 4 of Kael's men came racing up, then ran the other way. Allies or just smart, she didn't care. And when the last of those black uniformed guards had slumped to the to the bloody ground, she surged for Adian. He'd been gaping, but he let out a low, dark laugh as he stumbled into a sprint beside her, into the hedges. Archers. They had to clear the archers who were sure to begin firing as soon as the smoke vanished. They dashed around between the hedges she'd traversed dozens of times during her stay here, when she'd run every morning with Kael. Faster, Adian, she breathed, but he was already lagging. She paused and sliced into her blood-soaked wrist with a dagger before sketching the unlocking word marks on each of his manacles. Again, light flared and burned, but then the cuffs sprang open silently. Nice trick, he panted, and she yanked the chains off of him. She was about to chuck the metal aside when the gravel crunched behind them. I'm scared to read who this is. Not the guards, and not the king. Okay, good. It's not the guards, it's not the king. Who is it? Who could it be? Let's go through the list before we find out. I want to leave y'all and myself in suspense. Not the I thought it was the king. Not the guards, not the king. Who else could it? Who else could it be? Who else could it be? Who else could it be? Y'all, oh, I'm scared. It's Dorian, isn't it? Oh my god. It's Dorian, isn't it? I mean, who else? There's no one else. It's not the guards, it's not the king. Arabin, maybe? Maybe he's gonna capture them and reap the rewards, but I don't see. It was I'm sorry, I'm stuttering because I'm scared. It was with no small amount of horror that she found. Damn it! I was right. God damn it! I mean, in a way, this is kind of like a good thing because now she can free him. She can free him, right? Now she found Dorian strolling toward them. I mean, this is how Dorian gets free now. So this is a good thing. She's not gonna kill him. Okay, I'm fine. It's just a story. They're not real. It's Sarah, stop. Chapter 19. Hi, Ryan. Going somewhere? Dorian said, his hands in the pockets of his black pants. Stop, not my husband. The man who spoke those words was not her friend. She knew that before he'd even opened his mouth. The collar of his ebony tunic was unbuttoned, revealing the glimmering wordstone torque at the base of his throat. Unfortunately, Your Highness, we have another party to get to. She marked the slender red maple to the right, the hedges, the glass palace towering beyond them. They were too deep in the garden to be shot at, but every wasted second was as good as signing her own death sentence, and Adian's. Pity, said the vowed prince inside Dorian. It was just getting exciting. He struck. What? A wave of black lashed for her, and Adian shouted in warning. Blue flared before her, deflecting the assault from Adian. But she was shoved back a step, as if by a hard, dark wind. When the black cleared, the prince stared, as he gave a lazy, cruel smile. You warded yourself. Clever, lovely human thing. She'd spent all morning painting every inch of her body with word marks in her own blood, mixed with ink to hide the color. Adian, run for the wall, she breathed, not daring to take her eyes off the prince. Adian did no such thing. He's not the prince. Not anymore. I know, which is why you need to. Such heroics. I'm gonna cry, said the thing squatting squatting in her friend. Such foolish hope to think you can get away. Like an asp, he struck again with a wall of black-tainted power. It knocked her clean into Adian, who grunted in pain but set her upright. Her skin began tickling beneath her costume, as if the blood wards were flaking off with each assault. Useful but short-lived, precisely why she hadn't wasted them on getting into the castle. They had to get out of here now. She shoved the chains into Adian's hands, took the sword of Orinth from him, and stepped toward the prince. Slowly, she unsheathed the blade. Its weight was flawless, and the steel shone as brightly as it had the last time she'd seen it, in her father's hands. Fuck, I lost my spot. Oh, I found it, okay. The Vogue Prince snapped another whip of power at her, and she stumbled but kept walking, even as the blood wards beneath her costume crumbled away. One sign, Dorian, she said. Just give me one sign you're in there. The Vogue Prince laughed low and harsh, that beautiful face twisted with ancient brutality. His sapphire eyes were empty as he said, I'm going to destroy everything you love. She raised her father's sword in both hands, advancing still. You'd never do it, the thing said. Dorian, she repeated, her voice breaking. You are Dorian. Seconds. She had seconds left to give him. Her blood dripped onto the gravel, and she let it pool there, her eyes fixed on the prince as she began tracing a symbol with her foot. The demon chuckled again. Not anymore. She gazed into those eyes, at the mouth she'd once kissed, at the friend she'd once cared for so deeply, and begged, just one sign, Dorian. But there was nothing of her friend in that face, no hesitation or twinge of muscle against the attack as the prince lunged, and then froze as he passed over the word mark she'd drawn on the ground with her foot, a quick and dirty mark to hold him. It wouldn't last for more than a few moments. But that was all she needed as he was forced to his knees, thrashing and pushing against the power. Adian quietly swore. Aelin raised the sword of Orinth over Dorian's head. No. One strike. Just one, to cleave through flesh and bone, to spare him. The thing was roaring with a voice that didn't belong to Dorian, in a language that did not belong in this world. The mark on the ground flared but held. Dorian looked up at her. Such hatred on his beautiful face, such malice and rage. For Terrasen, for their future, she could do this. She could end this threat here and now, and him on his birthday. Not a day past 20. She would suffer for it later, grieve later. Not one more name would she... Oh, I'm gonna cry. I don't think she can't kill him. She can't. Not one more name would she etch into her flesh. She'd promised herself. But for her kingdom, the blade dipped, she decided, and impact slammed into her father's sword, knocking her off balance as Adian shouted. The arrow ricocheted into the garden, hissing against the gravel as it landed. Nesrin was already approaching, another arrow drawn, pointed at Adian. Strike the prince and he'll shoot the general. Dorian let out a lover's laugh. You're a shit spy, Aelin snapped at her. You didn't even try to remain hidden when you watched me inside. Erebin Hamel told the captain you were going to try to kill the prince today, Nesrin said. Put your sword down. Aelin ignored the command. Nesrin's father makes the best pear tarts in the capital. She supposed Erebin had tried to warn her, and she'd been too distracted by everything else to contemplate the veiled message. Stupid. So profoundly stupid of her. Only seconds left before the words failed. You lied to us, Nesrin said. The arrow remained pointed at Adian, who was sizing up Nesrin, his hands curling as if he were imagining his fingers wrapped around her throat. You and Kale are fools, Aelin said, even as a part of her heaved in relief, even as she wanted to admit that what she'd been about to do made her a fool as well. Aelin lowered the sword to her side. The thing inside Dorian hissed at her. You will regret this moment, girl. Aelin just whispered. I know. Aelin didn't give a shit what happened to Nesrin. She sheathed the sword, grabbed Adian, and ran. Adian's breath was like shards of glass in his lungs, but the blood-covered woman, Aelin, was tugging him along, cursing at him for being so slow. The garden was enormous, and shouts rose over the hedges behind them, closing in, and they were at a stone wall, already word-marked in blood, and there were strong hands reaching down to help him up and over. He tried to tell her to go first, but she was shoving at his back and then his legs, pushing him up as the two men atop the wall grunted with his weight. The wound in his ribs stretched and burned in agony. The world grew bright and spun as the hooded men eased him down to the quiet city street on the other side. He had to brace a hand against the wall to keep from slipping in the pooled blood of the downed royal guards beneath. He recognized none of their faces, some still set in silent screams. There was the hiss of a body on stone, and then his cousin swung down beside him, wrapping her gray cloak around her bloody costume, slinging the hood over her blood-splattered face. She had another cloak in her hands, courtesy of the wall patrol. He could hardly stand upright as she wrapped it around him and shoved the hood over his head. "Run," she said. The two men atop the wall remained there. Bows groaned as they were drawn. No sign of the young archer from the garden. Adian stumbled, and Aelin swore, darting back to wrap an arm around his middle. And damn his strength for failing him now. He put his arm around her shoulders, leaning on her as they hurried down the too quiet residential street. Shouts were now erupting behind, assented by the whiz and thud of arrows and the bleeding of dying men. 4 blocks, she panted. Just 4 blocks. That didn't seem nearly far enough away to be safe, but he had no breath to tell her. Keeping upright was task enough. The stitches in his side had split, but holy gods, they'd cleared the palace grounds. A miracle. A miracle. Hurry, you hulking ass! Sorry, all my phone is dying. Sorry. Adian forced himself to focus and willed strength to his legs, to his spine. They reached a street corner bedecked in streamers and flowers, and Aelin glanced in either direction before rushing through the intersection. The clash of steel on steel and the screams of wounded men shattered through the city, setting the throngs of merry-faced revelers around them to murmuring. But Aelin continued down the street, and then down another. At the third, she slowed her steps and rocked into him, beginning to sing a bawdy tune in a very off-key, drunken voice. And thus they became 2 ordinary citizens out to celebrate the prince's birthday, staggering from one tavern to the next. No one paid them any heed, not when all eyes were fixed on the glass castle towering behind them. The swaying made his head spin. If he fainted, 1 more block, she promised. This was all some hallucination. It had to be. No one would actually have been stupid enough to try to rescue him, and especially not his own queen. Even if he'd seen her cut down 6 men like so many stalks of wheat. Come on, she panted, scanning the decorated street, and he knew she wasn't talking to him. People were milling about, pausing to ask what the palace commotion was about. Aelin led them through the crowd, mere cloaked and stumbling drunks, right up to the black carriage for hire that pulled along the curb as though it had been waiting. The door sprang open. His cousin shoved him inside, right onto the floor, and shut the door behind her. Yep, it wouldn't be one of my lives if my phone was not dying. They're already stopping every carriage at the major intersections, Lysandra said, as Aelin pried open the hidden luggage compartment beneath one of the benches. It was big enough to fit a very tightly curled person, but Adian was absolutely massive, and in. Get in, now, she ordered, and didn't wait for Adian to move before she heaved him into the compartment. He groaned. Blood, poor Adian. Blood had started seeping from his side, but he'd live. That is, if any of them lived through the next few minutes. Aelin shut the panel beneath the cushion, wincing at the thought of wood on flesh, and grabbed the wet rag Lysandra had pulled from an old hat box. "Are you hurt?" Lysandra asked as the carriage started into a leisurely pace through the reveler-clogged streets. Aelin's heart was pounding so wildly that she thought she would vomit, but she shook her head as she wiped her face. So much blood, then the remnants of her makeup, then more blood. Lysandra handed her a second rag to wipe down her chest, neck, and hands, and then held out the loose, long-sleeved green dress she'd brought. Now, Lysandra breathed. Aelin ripped her bloodied cloak away and tossed it to Lysandra, who rose to shove it into the compartment beneath her own seat as Aelin shimmied into the dress. Lysandra's fingers were surprisingly steady as she buttoned up the back, then made quick work of Aelin's hair, handed her a pair of gloves, and slung a jeweled necklace around her throat. A fan was pressed into her hands the moment the gloves were on, concealing any trace of blood. The carriage halted at the sound of harsh male voices. Lysandra had just rolled up the curtains when stomping steps approached, followed by 4 of the king's guards peering into the carriage with sharp, merciless eyes. Lysandra thrust open the window. "Why are we being stopped?" The guard yanked open the door and stuck his head in. Aelin noticed a smudge of blood on the floor for a moment before he did and flinched back, covering it with her skirts. "Sir," Lysandra cried, "an explanation is necessary at once." Aelin waved her fan with a lady's horror, praying that her cousin kept quiet in this little compartment. On the street beyond, some revelers had paused to watch the inspection, wide-eyed, curious, and not at all inclined to help the two women inside the carriage. The guard looked them over with a sneer, the expression deepening as his eyes alighted on Lysandra's tattooed wrist. "I owe you nothing, whore." He spat out another filthy word at both of them, and then shouted, "Search the compartment in the back." "We're on our way to an appointment," Lysandra hissed, but he slammed the door in her face. The carriage jostled as the men leapt onto the back and opened the rear compartment. After a moment, someone slammed a hand onto the side of the carriage and shouted, "Move on." They didn't dare stop looking offended. Didn't dare stop fanning themselves for the next 2 blocks, or the 2 after that, until the driver thumped the top of the carriage twice. All clear. Aelin jumped off the bench and flung open the compartment. Adian had vomited, but he was awake and looking more than a bit put out as she beckoned him to emerge. Jesus. "One more stop, and then we're there." "Quick," said Lysandra, peering casually out the window. "The others are almost here." The alley was barely wide enough to fit both of the carriages that ambled toward each other, no more than 2 large vehicles slowing to avoid colliding as they passed. Lysandra flung open the door just as they were aligned with the other carriage, and Cale's tight face appeared across the way as he did the same. "Go, go, go," she said to Adian, shoving him over the small gap between the coaches. He stumbled, grunting as he landed against the captain. Lysandra said behind her, "I'll be there soon. Good luck." If she dies, I'ma cry. If she dies, I'ma cry. Adian leapt into the other carriage, shutting the door behind her. Not Adian, Aelin, sorry. And they continued on down the street. She was breathing so hard that she thought she'd never get enough air. Adian slumped onto the floor, keeping low. Cale said, "Everything all right?" She could only manage a nod, grateful he didn't push for any other answers. But it wasn't all right. Not at all. The carriage, driven by one of Cale's men, took them another few blocks, right to the border of the slums, where they got out on a deserted, decrepit street. She trusted Cale's men, but only so far. Taking Adian right to her apartment seemed like asking for trouble. With Adian sagging between them, she and Cale hurried down the next several blocks, taking the long way back to the warehouse to dodge any tail, listening so hard they'd barely breathed. But then they were at the warehouse, and Adian managed to stand long enough for Cale to slide the door open before they rushed inside, into the dark and safety at last. Cale took Aelin's place at Adian's side as she lingered by the door, grunting at the wait. He managed to get her cousin up the stairs. "He's got an injury along his ribs," she said, as she forced herself to wait, to monitor the warehouse door for any signs of pursuers. "It's bleeding." Cale gave her a confirming nod over his shoulder. When her cousin and the captain were almost to the top of the stairs, when it became clear no one was about to burst in, she followed them. But pausing had cost her. Pausing had let the razor-sharp focus slip. Huh? Let every thought she'd kept at bay come sweeping in. Every step she took was heavier than the last. 1 foot up, then the next, then the next. By the time she made it to the 2nd floor, Cale had taken Adian into the guest bedroom. The sound of running water gurgled out to greet her. Aelin left the front door unlocked for Lysandra, and for a moment she just stood in her apartment, bracing a hand on the back of the couch, staring at nothing. When she was certain she could move again, she strode into her bedroom. She was naked before she reached the bathing chamber, and she sat herself right in the cold, dry tub before she turned on the water. Once she emerged clean and wearing one of Sam's... When I read for the first time that after she found out what happened to Sam, that she had not been able to not sleep in one of his shirts, y'all, I cried so hard. What did they do to my baby? What did they do to him? Oh my God. Anyway, wearing one of Sam's old white shirts and a pair of his undershorts, Cale was waiting for her on the couch. She didn't dare look at his face. Not yet. No, that's one of the chapters that I read by myself. And it's just, if I think about it, that was tough, because if I think about it, I'm going to start crying. Shut up, we're not talking about Sam right now. Lysandra popped her head in from the... Oh, now my voice is shaking, and when they're talking, their voices aren't shaking, so hold on. Lysandra popped her head in from the guest room. I'm just finishing cleaning him up. He should be fine if he doesn't burst the stitches again. No infection, thank the gods. Aelin lifted a limp hand in thanks, also not daring to look into the room behind Lysandra to see the massive figure lying on the bed, a towel around his waist. If Chaol and the courtesan had been introduced, she didn't particularly care. There was no good place to have this talk with Chaol, so she just stood in the center of the room and watched as the captain rose from his seat, his shoulders tight. What happened? He demanded. She swallowed once. I killed a lot of people today. I'm not in the mood to analyze it. That's never bothered you before. She couldn't dredge up the energy to even feel the sting of his words. The next time you decide you don't trust me, try not to prove it at a time when my life for Adians is on the line. A flash of his bronze eyes told her he'd somehow already seen Nesrin. Chaol's voice was hard and cold as ice as he said, You tried to kill him. You said you'd try to get him out, to help him, and you tried to kill him. The bedroom where Lysandra was working had gone silent. That bitch listening. Aelin let out a low snarl. You want to know what I did? I gave him 1 minute. I gave up 1 minute of my escape to him. Do you understand what can happen in 1 minute? Because I gave Dorian... Stop, I'm gonna cry. Because I gave one to Dorian when he attacked Adian, and me today, to capture us. I gave him a minute in which the fate of my entire kingdom could have changed forever. I chose the son of my enemy. He gripped the back of the sofa as though physically restraining himself. You're a liar. You've always been a liar, and today was no exception. You had a sword over his head. I did, she spat, and before Philippe arrived to wreck everything, I was going to do it. I should have done it, as anyone with common sense would have, because Dorian is gone. And there was her breaking heart, fracturing at the monster she'd seen living in Dorian's eyes, the demon that would hunt her in Adian Down, that would stalk her dreams. I do not owe you an apology, she said to Chaol. Don't talk down to me like you're my queen, he snapped. No, I'm not your queen, but you are going to have to decide soon whom you serve, because the Dorian you knew is gone forever. Ardalan's future does not depend on him anymore. The agony in Chaol's eyes hit her like a physical blow, and she wished she had mastered herself better when explaining it, but she needed him to understand the risk she'd taken, and the danger he'd let Erebin manipulate him into putting her in. He had to know that there was a hard line that she must draw, and that she would hold, to protect her own people. So she said, Go to the roof and take the first watch. Chaol blinked. I'm not your queen, but I'm going to attend to my cousin right now. And since I hope Nesrin is lying low, someone needs to take the watch, unless you'd like for us all to be caught unawared by the king's men. Chaol didn't bother replying as he turned on his heel and strode out. She listened to him, storming up the stairs and onto the roof, and it was only then that she loosed a breath and scrubbed her face. When she lowered her hand, Lysandra was standing in the guest bedroom doorway, her eyes wide. What do you mean, queen? Oh! Aelin winced, swearing under her breath. That's exactly the word I'd use, Lysandra said, her face pale. Aelin said, My name... Oh, I know your real name is Aelin. Shit. You understand why I had to keep it a secret? Of course I do, Lysandra said, pursing her lips. You don't know me, and more lives than yours are at stake. No, I do know you. God, why were the words so damn hard to get out? The longer the hurt flickered in Lysandra's eyes, the wider the gap across the room felt. Aelin swallowed. Until I got Adian back, I wasn't going to take any chances. I knew I would have to tell you the moment you saw us in a room together. And Erebin knows. Those green eyes were hard as chips of ice. He's always known. This changes nothing between us. You know. Nothing. Lysandra glanced behind her, to the bedroom where Adian now lay unconscious and loosed a long breath. The resemblance is uncanny. God, the fact that you went undiscovered for so many years boggles the mind. She studied Adian again. Even though he's a handsome bastard, it'd be like kissing you. Her eyes were still hard, but a flicker of amusement gleamed there. Aylin grimaced. I could have lived without knowing that. She shook her head. I don't know why I was ever nervous you would start bowing and scraping. Light and understanding danced in Lysandra's eyes. Where would the fun be in that? Damn. That was a lot. That was a lot for... Yeah. That was a... Oh, God. This book is stressing me out. I hope... Okay, so this entire series is giving me Game of Thrones. It's just giving very heavily Game of Thrones inspired. And so I hope that Lysandra and Aelin end up sort of being like Daenerys and... Oh my god, I forgot her name. Missandei? Yes, Missandei. Daenerys and Missandei. So like the queen and like her right-hand girl. Like the two besties. You know? I hope they end up being like that. And like Aelin is able to like buy Lysandra's freedom. The chick who lost her head. Why would you say that? Why would you put it like that? I guess. Yes. If that's how you want to remember her. She does need a bestie. She needs a best friend. After Nehemiah, like she needs a girlfriend. She needs like a girlfriend. My poor girl. Y'all, this was so much. So, my palms, I can't even express to y'all how sweaty my hands were. Wouldn't that be Sorcha then? Stop it. Stop it. And Evangeline? Hold on. That's someone in this book? Evangeline? Why am I drawing a blank on who Evangeline is? The little girl. Oh, yes. Yes. Sorry. I was like, who the hell is that? Yes. Sorry. Sorry. Yeah, the little girl. Yeah. Her and Evangeline. She needs to like take them with her when she takes back Terrasen. Sorry, y'all, my phone is still dying. It's still dying. Oh god, thoughts are just... I feel like that was too easy, though. You know, I feel like that was too easy. I feel like the king might have let them get away, but I don't know why. My battery's at 10% right now, so she's on her way to death. You're still early in the book. It's okay. Take the wins while you can. I guess. But me, I'm always expecting like the other shoe to drop. Like I'm so, I can't trust this bitch. Can't trust her. And I just felt like that was, I mean, the king was in that room with them. I feel like it was just too easy of a job. It was too easy. They got out too easy. We still have to deal with the Dorian situation. That we do. I know my man gets free. I know he does. He has to. There's no way that Dorian died that day in that room. There's no way. There's no way. He is alive. He's obviously still alive in there. And he will get out. And I'm hoping it's by his own, like, moment of realization, you know? And then, you know, Aelin will, like, fucking eat her words whenever she, like, realizes that he was alive the entire time in there. What happens in chapter 30? No, Dorian has to get out. Dorian has to get out. Y'all, be real with me. Dorian has to get out. You can't tell me that he doesn't get out, because I know he does. What happens in chapter 30? See, now I'm scared. What happens in chapter 30? Because we're on chapter 20 right now. A big time hoodie chapter? Are you joking me? Y'all, also, I don't think I can bring the hoodie to the lives anymore, because I live in Texas and it is the middle of July. It is hot. It's too hot for the hoodie. I might be able to bring like maybe a scarf I'll wrap around my head or something. But it's too hot in Texas to wear the hoodie. Or maybe like a cardigan, like a thin cardigan with a hood, or like a light jacket, because like in my car the AC is fine. I can bring my Squishmallow. I'll bring my comfort Squishmallow, and I'll hold him during those parts. You can drape it behind you and just put the hood on. I'll bring my Squishmallow. That's what I'll bring. What happens in chapter 30? Yo, that's scary. Now I'm scared. I don't want to read this book anymore, because I mean, I ended it on a pretty high note. I could just leave it here. Oh, we're back to Manon in this chapter. Am I reading chapter 20 by myself? I feel like I am. Yeah, I'm reading 21 through 25 next. So that'll be tomorrow. Chapter 30 is the one I cried over in the Insta chat. The one that I couldn't join, that I was throwing a fit about. Leave Dorian in his current state? Absolutely not. My man needs to be free of this demon prince. He needs to be free. But like, he also needs to still be alive. I'm team Kale in this like Dorian debate. Like, there's Selena where she's like, we need to kill him, and then there's Kale where he's like, he's still in there, like, we're getting him out. I'm with Kale on that one. I have to agree with Kale on that one. I'm not giving up hope on Dorian. I can't. Sorry, that's my husband. I have to ride for him until the end. So, yeah. I can't lose hope in my Dorian. Oh god, chapter 30 is gonna be a bitch of a chapter, isn't it? So after, oh fuck. Alright, well, so much good in this book. Good as in like, good entertaining stuff for y'all to watch me read while I cry my eyes out, or like, just like good moments in general in the book. Not the next live or the one after those. Okay. All right. I suppose. Thanks for the book club, dude. This is cool. Yeah, no problem. We do this like every weekend, and then we do it like 2 days during the week. Wednesdays and Thursdays, and Saturdays and Sundays are usually when I do them. So come anytime, watch me scream and cry over these books. The son of my enemy, yeah. But Dorian's not her enemy. I love Dorian. Love that man. I think honestly that she was going to do it. I think she really was. But I think she's not. Obviously she doesn't want to kill him because she wants him dead. Like, she wants to kill him as a mercy to Dorian, which I sympathize with, and I see why she would want to do that. But I honestly think that she was going to go through with it until Nesrin stepped in. Yeah, she just wants him to be okay, which, like, I get, but I know he's still in there. He has to be. So that's why I'm holding out for him. But I can see why she would want to just put him out of his misery, because it's pretty bad. It's not looking too good for him. So, okay. Well, I will see you guys tomorrow. I'm thinking I might have to do it a little earlier. So I'll probably do the live around 1:30 tomorrow, because I'm meeting my friend for food to catch up. So I'll probably I'll schedule it for 1:30, and we'll do a live at 1:30. So, for tomorrow. So yeah. I will see y'all tomorrow. Thank you for coming and joining with me on this crazy roller coaster of 5 chapters that we read. It was a lot. And hopefully tomorrow will be a little more mellow, a little more chill. So, yeah. I love y'all. I will see y'all tomorrow at 1:30. We will read chapters 21 through 25. Thank you, Sarah. And, yeah.